Here we are in the appearance area. So let's start by looking at logos. Within Moodle you can add a number of logos, both a high resolution large logo which will actually be scaled down for use across your site, and you can also upload a compact logo, so a smaller version or an emblem or an icon to represent your organization. And these two images can be used throughout the site automatically via a number of themes, including the core themes within Moodle. The calendar, a few settings related to the calendar for administrators. For example, whether administrators actually see all events across the site or just their own. The time display, whether that's 24-hour or 12-hour or the default, and users can override that in their own profile settings. The start of the week, generally for myself, my week would start on a Monday. That may vary for you, particularly if you are in a part of the world that has a different weekend. So I'm aware that some Middle East regions, for example, actually have their weekend, I think, on a Friday and Saturday. So we can change those things in here if you wish. And then we've got some controls around how far ahead the calendar actually looks for things like upcoming events and how many events it will actually display as a maximum. So control there over what people actually are going to see in those events, and looking ahead and thinking about the calendar. And if you've got a very busy site with lots of calendar events, you perhaps don't want to look ahead 6 months, because that could be very overwhelming. So it's a case of trying to understand what the users will see and how that's going to work for them. We can also export calendars if you allow that. By default it is enabled, and it's possible to select a range or a date range for those exports as well. We also have a calendar export salt, which is basically a code which allows for encryption, so that if you're exporting the calendar, it gives some level of authentication with that. You have to be careful. If you change this, then anything that is previously set up is not going to work. We also have setting here for showing information for iCal events. So iCal is a kind of standard within calendar systems now. So Apple Calendar support iCal. I'm sure that Microsoft Exchange or the calendaring system within Windows exports that now. We have some settings relating to blogs, whether blog entries can be associated with courses and modules, and the visibility of blogs as well. If you want a site-wide setting where users can only see their own blog entries, you could change that here. The default is for all site users to be able to see all blog entries. There is a setting that can enable the whole world to read the blog entries, so it actually makes those world accessible, so that guest accounts and web crawlers and visitors to the site can see these. You have to be careful with that, because that obviously can be very attractive to spammers. If you have a very popular site, you may get people creating accounts so they can put spam into their blogs, and then that will get served up from your site. We can enable external blogs, so Moodle can actually pull in information from external blogs and show that within the Moodle blog. That can be a pretty cool function if blogging is a large element within your site, something that you expect users to do. And it will synchronize that every 24 hours. By default, you can bring that down if necessary. Also, the default number of external blogs allowed. You may want to increase that, again, if your users are using a lot of blogs on different sites, but generally one is probably okay. And then a couple of other settings for the blogs, whether you enable comments on blog entries and whether you show the comment count. So that just gives people a little bit more feedback and a little bit more ability to use those blogs in a way that's perhaps more familiar with WordPress or Blogger and other systems that people may be familiar with and using. Navigation, quite a few settings in here to be aware of. This is an important one, the default homepage for users. So the defaults or the options are site, which means when a user logs in, they're sent to the site page. The dashboard, which is that individual view that users have of their own courses and details like that. Or we can leave it as a user preference. I personally like going to the site or the user preference, because experience has shown us that if people are automatically logged into their dashboard, they often miss things that are at the site level that we might want them to be aware of. If you do force the dashboard setting here, be aware of how that is going to impact your users. We can allow guest access to the dashboard. I've never really found a use case of why we would want to do that, and the default is actually yes. I personally think that guests on a site should be seeing probably the front page, but you may have a different strategy and find a good reason to allow guests to have a dashboard and be sent to the dashboard. We have options to show the course full name rather than the short name. Again, that can cause issues. Clearly the long name is much bigger than the short name, so it can knock your navigation links and blocks out of alignment quite easily, because there's a bigger amount of text to put in there. But that may also be useful if your short name is not necessarily very clear for people, so you may prefer to use the long name there. We can show course categories. We can show my course categories for users if you want to. We've got an option to show all courses rather than just the courses that users are already enrolled in. And we can sort those courses either by the default sort order, or we can actually sort them by, for example, the course full name or short name. ID number, probably less important, but certainly full name and short name could be useful. And then we've got some settings around the maximum number of courses shown. Clearly, if you've got a site with 1,000 courses, that can be very overwhelming. Whether we use the site name itself for site pages rather than site, so that can be a bit more helpful. Linking the admin categories, that leads to the admin category pages, could be useful for you on a large and busy site. Whether we allow links to course sections, usually not necessary. It can get quite overwhelming, because that's going to generate a lot of links, one to each section of your course, of the courses on the site. So again, that can make that navigation menu very large. And then a couple of options here, whether we want to show any activities that are on the front page of the site within the navigation. It may not be necessary for users to see those front page activities once they're actually within their course. And whether there are links to the view user posts. So this will add extra links in here so that it's easy for users to see conversations or forum discussions that they have started or that they have posted to. I quite like that setting on it. If you use forums a lot, you'll find that's actually a very helpful setting. HTML settings. This allows us to look at some of the HTML tags that are actually set up by default within Moodle. Just shrink the screen down a little bit there. So the first thing we can do is uncheck this box to make sure that HTML tags are not available for use within your activity and resource names. That can be a bit confusing, And if you've already got the filtering set so that activities and resources are auto-linked, then that can result in some strange behaviors really, and strange appearances. So if you want to allow HTML tags in the activity names, then you can switch that on, but generally it works really well if that's disabled and not switched on. And then we can see all the shortcut codes for the emoticons and what they will change into if you have the filter enabled for this. So Moodle filter will automatically change this code to this emoticon, this little face, and that's quite nice that it does that automatically. Moodle docs, we are able to ensure we have the correct link to Moodle docs, and I actually think that's incorrect, and I think that should be a secure Moodle docs site. If you have a multilingual site, you can actually choose if you wish to force a language. If you have a multilingual site, you may not want to enable that, so that when people click on the help, they actually can be directed to the correct language based on the language they're using in their system. Personally, I always like to enable the option to open help in a new window rather than replace the window I'm in right now. That kind of makes more sense for me, that it opens the help, I can read the help and then instantly just click back to perform that operation or find that function, whatever it is I'm looking for. You may find your users prefer that help to be displayed in the active page, and then they just use their back button in their browser. But always a matter for debate, that one. We can look at the default dashboard page. So each user has a dashboard page which will show the courses that they are enrolled in generally, and other blocks. So the defaults are to show the user's private files and their latest badges and the calendar and so on. We can switch on the editing here and change how this default dashboard page looks. So if we want the latest badges at the top, we can just move that around and then turn that off. If we want to, we can force that for all users, whether they are existing users or new users, just by doing reset dashboard for all users. The editing off, and now we can see the latest badges is above private files, and that will apply to everyone's dashboard. We also have a default profile page that we can, again, as the administrator, actually switch the editing on and off, add blocks, configure this page how we want, and that then becomes the default profile page for all users. Courses, lots of control over courses here. First of all, who the contacts for a course are. If you would like to have both the teachers and non-editing teachers displayed as course contacts, then you can just switch that on. We can also adjust a few other things in here that are quite nice. Perhaps one of them is that it's possible with Moodle to add files to the course summaries, which you would generally see maybe on the front page if you've enabled course listings and summaries to be displayed. This allows you to add images, so you could add a little logo or a little picture to each course description. Ajax and JavaScript. Generally, you would leave all these settings as they are. These will help speed up the performance and display of elements within the Moodle interface these days. Very much JavaScript driven. So unless you have a problem or you know why you're changing these things, probably best to leave them alone. We can manage tags. The tagging system in Moodle now, very advanced. We can tag blog posts and wiki pages and courses and activities and so on. As we see here, all the different elements that can be tagged, whether that is enabled or disabled, And then also whether those tags go into a default collection and whether the system suggests tags to users as they are creating them. So it's important to kind of understand how the tagging system works. It has changed quite a lot in Moodle over the years, from its very basic functionality to a lot more advanced these days. And if you have lots of users and lots of courses and lots of resources that you want to kind of link up in various ways and make people aware of them, then tagging can be a really good way to do that, because when a user clicks on a tag, they're going to see all the other items that that tag is associated with. So certainly something worth investigating, and the help on that is very good as well. Additional HTML. This is where you can add additional HTML to every page. The most popular use for this would be to add some information, probably within the header, for analytics and tracking. So if you use Google Analytics or pwiki or some of the other systems that enable you to log all this information and track all this information, then you will have some HTML code that you're able to copy and paste into here, and that will help with your data collection basically. And then finally we have user tours. This is again one of the newer features within Moodle. User tours made popular by various applications around the web. So the idea is when you visit a page for the first time, you have a guide, almost like a little wizard that is showing you around the page and helping you orientate yourself. So that can be very useful for people, for students, learners who are new to your site. You can set up user tours for them. By default, Moodle is installed in this version with a couple of tours as examples for administrators. So administrators can see a user tour on the front page, and also for when they visit a new course. So user tours are something that have to be set up by the administrator, or perhaps imported from or created elsewhere and imported into this site. It is fairly straightforward to import tours, and there is also now a small repository of tours that people have created that you could actually bring in. That, of course, how useful that is, of course, is going to very much depend on how similar your site is and your instructions need to be, compared to the site that this tour was created for. So they can be very specific, obviously, to the way your site is set up and appears. Just as an example, if I go to a course page, at the bottom here we can see we have reset user tour on this page. So pages that have a user tour will automatically play, and when they've completed they won't play again, but we can reset that so that it does play again. So I'm just going to click on reset user tour, and that user tour instantly appears. So this is just a welcome explaining to me that in this particular version of Moodle there's a new theme and it's a little bit different. So okay, let's have a look at how this is different. So basically now I can just click on next and I get a nice little tour, explains a few things, maybe it gives me a task to do. I'm happy with that. I can move on to the next thing, and you'll see it's a very simple but very effective way of just guiding someone around this screen and maybe how to use the site a little bit. Certainly something worth investigating. Could be a real time saver if you have maybe users that are not hugely IT literate. Maybe this can really help guide them through that first experience of using the site.